The idea behind the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is for Apple to give us the biggest and best iPad that they can make. But was it actually worth the upgrade? There's no question that this is an absolutely beautiful tablet. It has an unbelievable display, incredible speakers, the most advanced camera system that Apple offers in a tablet, and probably more processing power than the vast majority of users actually need. I have the 5th generation M1 iPad Pro here, which I upgraded to from the 2020 4th generation. And after 10 months of use, I wanted to share my experience with you and talk about whether I would do it again. And thank you to Best Buy for sponsoring this video. I love the size of this larger iPad, and at the same time, you have to concede that you're giving up some on portability. If you're coming from a smaller tablet the size of an iPad Air, or even something like the Samsung Galaxy Tab S7 Plus, this will be a noticeable change for you. I pretty much always have it in the Magic Keyboard or with the Logitech Combo Touch, both of which add a lot of benefits, but they also add to the weight and the size. If you're not looking for that additional functionality, then you can go with a slimmer case, but I absolutely love having a keyboard and a trackpad when I use my iPad Pro. So whether I'm sending emails, doing research for a video, or replying to your comments, which I try to do as much as possible, I can get so much more done with a dedicated keyboard. And by the way, both of these are excellent options, but there are some very specific differences that would make you choose one over the other. So if you're interested in learning more, I'll link to that video in the description. Now, while this clearly isn't the most portable iPad, you kind of know that going in. And in my opinion, the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Now, this is my favorite iPad to use when I need to get stuff done. The larger display and the 2732 by 2048 resolution mean that I have plenty of screen real estate to work with. I can see more at once without having to constantly scroll. I get a nice and large image when I'm watching video, and it's a fantastic canvas when working with the 2nd generation Apple Pencil. Interestingly enough, the Apple Pencil is a tool that I wasn't sure that I would get enough value out of, but ever since I got it, it's become an invaluable part of my iPad experience. And it goes beyond just a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. I use it with my iPad mini, my iPad Air 4, and the 11-inch iPad Pro. Now remember that I already had the 4th generation iPad Pro, so one of the exciting upgrades for me was the move to the Liquid Retina XDR display on the newer model. Now, as you may already know, it uses mini LEDs, which provide deeper black levels and a higher contrast ratio when viewing HDR content. If you're watching SDR content or using your iPad Pro just for productivity, this new display wouldn't be a reason to upgrade because things would look the same. But if you're like me and you watch HDR content, you will absolutely and immediately notice the difference. The display definitely gets brighter, the colors are incredible, and there's an obvious change in dynamic range, so you're able to see more details in the shadows and the highlights. I also like to use this display with my Mac Mini, my iMac, or one of my MacBooks with Sidecar. If you have an iPad and a Mac and you're not using that feature, you should be. It basically lets you use your iPad as an additional display, either wired or wirelessly. The iPad Pro is actually a better display than I have on my main workstation, and it's also a better display than I have on my M1 MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. So it's great to be able to color correct and color grade video and then to edit photos. And even if I didn't do those things, I'm still a huge of having additional displays from a productivity standpoint. Although in that case, I guess the 2020 iPad Pro would work just as well. Now, one other feature that the two iPad Pro models have in common is ProMotion, which is Apple's adaptive refresh rate of up to 120 Hz. This essentially means that the iPad can detect what type of content is being displayed and then in real time either lower the refresh rate to save on battery life or increase the refresh rate all the way up to 120 Hz for a smooth and responsive user experience. Now, this sort of gives you the best of both worlds because you get that fluid user experience when you need it, but you're also not wasting battery life on refreshing the display 120 times every second when you're just sitting there reading a book. Now, I also want to address the blooming on this new iPad Pro. I've heard from people who see it and people who don't. And I can tell you that I've never thought about it beyond the initial hype. Maybe my eyes are just going bad, but I have a very practical approach here. When I look at this display next to the 2020 iPad Pro, I like this one better, and that would be one of the reasons why I would buy this iPad. Now, if you're in the market for a tablet or other consumer electronics on President's Day, you should check out the sponsor of this video, Best Buy, for some great deals. I'm looking for a new TV for something fun in a future video, and I was checking out the 75 to 84 inch range. I found some pretty affordable options and then some great discounts. And by the way, a lot of times I'm able to find open box items that are even more heavily discounted. Best Buy has discounts on Apple products, laptops, cell phones, desktops, and even camera gear, which you know I'm going to love. There's also a nice selection of PC gaming accessories in case it's time to update your battle station. So whether you're looking for a new capture card, a gaming mouse, or a new mechanical keyboard, you should be able to find some great options for any budget. And also, don't forget about your audio. It's just so much better when you have a gaming headset and a microphone. And if you haven't checked out the Stream Deck yet, it's time. So if you're looking for some new gear, home appliances, or a lot of other consumer electronics but don't want to pay full price, check out Best Buy for some great discounts, and thank you to Best Buy for sponsoring this video. Back to the iPad Pro, something else that I really like about it is Face ID for biometric authentication. It's extremely fast, almost to the point where I don't even think about it. I just tap on the screen, swipe up, and even if I'm not sitting directly in front of it, it doesn't seem to have any type of trouble identifying my face. Ultimately, I think that it would be cool if on the next generation, in addition to Face ID, Apple would include the Touch ID that we see on the iPad Air 4 and the iPad Mini 6. Now, with the newer display and all the multitasking capabilities that are available in iPadOS, you may be wondering about battery life. Now, the nice thing about the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is that it has more room for a larger battery. For the most part, I can easily get through a full day of typical use without needing to charge this iPad. And it actually charges very fast if you use a higher capacity charger. Now, of course, battery life depends on what you do. So if I sit down and play PUBG for a few hours, that's definitely gonna put a good dent in my battery life, but that's true for any mobile device. I compared the 12.9-inch iPad Pro with the rest of the lineup, and the results were actually shocking, so I'll link to that video at the end of this one. We talked a little bit about the accessories for the iPad Pro, but what about this new port? It's a Thunderbolt/USB 4 port, so it's capable of faster transfer speeds, and it's compatible with more powerful Thunderbolt accessories like faster SSDs and higher resolution displays. For the most part, this hasn't been a feature that I've taken advantage of. External display support on the iPad is still not what I want it to be, and for the most part, I transfer files using AirDrop because it's so convenient. But if you're the type of user who normally transfers large number of photo or video files, this can actually translate into a meaningful difference. Since it's something that you'd be doing over and over again, it will save you time and it will remove some friction from the creative process, which is something that I always look for. A couple of other features that may be important to some users but not others are the audio and camera systems. The quad speakers on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro are absolutely outstanding for a tablet. They provide an impressive soundstage considering their size, and they automatically detect when you change orientation from portrait to landscape mode. If you don't plan on using the speakers on your tablet, then obviously this isn't an advantage over a lower end iPad, but if you do, it's a noticeable improvement even over something like the iPad Air 4. Now, without having to dive too deep into it and get all nerdy with camera talk like I usually do, this is the best camera system that Apple offers on a tablet, period. On the front end, we get a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera, which has a feature called Center Stage. So the iPad Pro can use this ultra-wide camera to track you as you move around and then zoom in and out to keep you in the frame. If you do video calls where you're moving around, this is actually a really cool feature because it creates a much more dynamic experience for the other person. Also, because this camera is a true depth camera, it's different than what you get on the iPad 9 or the iPad Mini 6, and you have additional features like portrait mode and portrait lighting. Now, looking at the rear-facing camera module, we're getting a 12 megapixel wide and a 10 megapixel ultra-wide camera, as well as a flash and a LiDAR scanner. Again, this is as good as you can get on any iPad, but I want you to think about whether you would actually use it. If you have a use case for the LiDAR scanner, or if you plan on actually recording video and taking pictures with your iPad, then it's worth it. Personally, I use my iPhone for that because it's much more convenient and I haven't worked the LiDAR scanner into my everyday use, so for me, this is a luxury more than a must-have. And this luxury, along with other features, come at a price. So before we get to gaming, let's talk about our options. The Wi-Fi only models of the 5th generation iPad Pro starts at 128 gigabytes for $1099, and it goes all the way up to a whopping 2 terabytes for $2,199. All the models come with the extremely powerful M1 chip, but if you get the 128, 256, and 512 gig models, you're getting 8 gigabytes of RAM. If you upgrade to the 1 or 2 terabyte models, you get 16 gigs of RAM. I can tell you that the 8 gigabytes of RAM have easily crushed absolutely everything that I've thrown at this iPad. I can run any app or game that I want. I can multitask with several apps running at the same time. I can edit video and photos, and this thing runs without a hiccup. One thing to keep in mind is that if you plan on editing videos in LumaFusion and you have an iPad with a USB Type-C port, you can actually edit directly off of an external SSD without having to copy the files onto your iPad. This is an awesome upgrade. You can get a lot more storage and save a ton of money by using external SSDs instead of upgrading the internal storage. Now let's get to gaming, which is absolutely awesome on this iPad, but with one caveat. So the display is incredible. It's bright, it's crisp, and you have a maximum of 120 Hz, so gameplay is extremely smooth. We also have plenty of RAM, so even resource-intensive games can run without an issue. When playing PUBG, I can run smooth graphics at 90 frames per second, or all the way up to Ultra HD for graphics and Ultra for frame rate. The one thing I want you to keep in mind is the size. So on the one hand, it's great to have a larger display and it's much easier to see small, important details. On the other hand, if you're playing something like PUBG for a few hours, it means you have to handle a pretty large and relatively heavy tablet. Now, this isn't necessarily a negative for every person, but just something that I wanted to bring to your attention in case you've never tried it. Now, there isn't a 3.5mm headphone jack, so if you want to use a wired headset, you'll need to get one that plugs into USB-C, or you can use an adapter. Then again, if you plan on using the speakers, these are just about as good as it gets. They get plenty loud and they provide excellent directional audio so you can detect where footsteps are coming from. Now, something else I love doing is pairing my Xbox controller with the iPad Pro and then playing games using the Xbox Game Pass app. This means that I have a really nice and big display and can have an incredible mobile gaming experience anywhere. All in all, my user experience with the 12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro has been outstanding. But the question is, do I think it was worth the upgrade? So it was for me, but I wouldn't say that that's true for every person. If you're using a 12.9-inch iPad Pro because you want the largest display on an iPad, you want a great user experience with ProMotion, a great camera and audio system, and compatibility with the Magic Keyboard and the 2nd generation Apple Pencil, you can get that with one of the older models. If you're like me and you like watching HDR content, this is definitely a meaningful upgrade to the display. If you plan on taking advantage of the additional processing power and RAM, if you're looking for a more powerful port, a higher maximum internal storage capacity, a better front-facing camera, slightly better speakers, and 5G support, then the M1 iPad Pro is definitely worth the upgrade. Now you should watch this iPad battery drain test. Hopefully this video was helpful. Click on my face to subscribe. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.